So we are live now. Welcome, everyone. This is the first event that we are doing, and we have Krish Shankar, ex Infosys, and a new entrepreneur with us, with a lot of experience around various kind of stints that he had in the corporate world, and now looking at active consulting. Uh, we will allow questions. You can put your questions in the comments on LinkedIn Live or YouTube, and whatever we can, we will try and take it at the end of the event. Today's topic is bringing your personal best to work, and we'll have Krish talk about some of his experiences, and then we'll take your questions if you have something to ask of him. So, Krish, quickly, wanted to understand or talk about your career journey and some of the examples of how you brought your personal best to work.
My God, that's like the big question. No, I think if you look at my career journey, I think it's been the beginning. I would say it's like two or three parts. One looks at it. I think in the beginning it was a little bit of what I call as a tentative start, saying, I'm not sure what I can do and how I can do. So that's the first, I'd say 5, 6 years. Well, I would say a bit tentative. I started off with iShare a couple of years. A lot of great work I enjoyed doing there, running training programs on my own and, various other things. And iShare gives lots of empowerment to people to do. And then with levers, and I spent about 21 years with levers, and there I think it was various stints. But again, it was a little bit about, I'm not sure how good I am, what can I do. So the first 5 years was all about, I was like, trying to discover myself, trying to see what I can do, etc. As I kind of established about 4, 5 years down in levers, the one opportunity came when I was a personnel manager of a factory. I was told, the production manager is away. Why don't you manage that also for a year? So for a year, I was doing manufacturing of the export plant, one of the plants, and then handling personnel for that factory. And that kind of, made me do a lot of people management stuff and, in a way, try and implement some of the HR stuff actually, as a line manager. So I did that. And then I got an opportunity to work for a few years as a factory manager. So about 4 years, I was actually running the part of the exports business out of Chennai. And that was truly a great opportunity. You're on the road. I set up a new factory and managing people, etc. So again, great learning. But after that, I was called back to HR. Then I did recruitment, I did training. I went to the UK, came back to India as a head of what we call as management development, and also as a business partner for the foods and beverages business. And then I went to Singapore for a few years doing some roles in the regional thing. So I would say that this part is where I discovered what I can be good at. And what I found was I'm probably good at really working with people, uh, working with younger people, giving them space, mentoring them. So I think that became an area where I saw that was something that I did okay. People also resonated with me, and that's something that I started building as my what I call my strength, yeah, or whatever you call it. I think, and when I went to Singapore, I think there again I was working, and one of the things was really developing a lot of non-Indians. So my team had about 5 women leaders, all from different countries: Vietnam, China, Philippines, Sri Lanka, South Africa, and each of them was leading. And when I left, it was good to see them all take on bigger roles. So I think that clearly became an area where I thought I was good at. And then, then I would say two other big roles. One was Airtel as CHRO, and then Infosys. And both these roles were all about kind of, seeing what can you bring, and make an impact. And there, I think in Airtel, it was about after 21 years with levers, where you're used to systems being already given, and you're used to existing. Airtel, it is all about working with new systems, building new systems. So that was a great thing, and building a whole new team, and and a philosophy of HR, which I think I really enjoyed. And then with Infosys again, which is again the next level of governance, managing the global scale, transformation, etc. So if I just look at my career, I would say, It's like, a career, I mean, two learnings in a way. A career is like a DNA of two strands of DNA. Yeah. And these kind of intertwine and move across. And one of those strands I call as the CV strand. It is about what what jobs have you done, what experiences have you done, and it's about, you've got to do the right experiences to build your career. So that is the CV, your CV, and that strand is like, one part of the career. The second one is what I call as your leadership brand, or your brand, or what is it that you're known for. And that's the second strand. And these two strands come together and really make your career. In the first half of your career, let's say the first 10, 15 years, the CV is more important. You've got to really work on what kind of jobs you're doing, what are you doing. You build those set of experiences. You're building your leadership brand in the background. It's not coming out there, but you're building it in the background and you work on it. And you discover your strengths. You say, what am I good at? And then you start kind of building around it. The second half of your career, I think it's all about how do you really take that experiences and make an impact. So there the leadership brand becomes much more important, because you got to, and people say, and they, that's becomes more critical. And here it is not about the experience, it's about how you bring it all together, how you kind of, ensure there is perspective, you bring that broader perspective, and your leadership brand, your legacy. That's what is at work. So again, key learning is a career is always of these two strands of DNA: the CV, or the kind of experiences you have, which is very important in the first 10 to 15 years, so that you pick the right jobs, get the right experiences. But the second half of your career, let's say, it's all about what are you as a person, what are your strengths, and how are you able to leverage them, what new perspectives you bring. Yeah, so that's, I think, the second part of the career. So yeah, that's probably a quick summary about how I looked at my career over these years, Sanjay.
And Krish, very interesting thing that your career went through was you being an HR person, being asked to, manage a role at the factory as a factory manager. Now, in a situation like this, if you are called out to take on something that is not, something you are trained on, in that situation, there must have been a lot of stress at that age. How do you manage some of these kind of situations where you are asked to work on things that you're not trained to do or you've not done in the past?
Yeah. It's an important thing, because, see, as I said, when I was doing the personnel job in a factory in Gujarat, the 1 year I was doing production in addition, because the production manager was transferred and they said, if you can do both, manage it. So for a year, I was doing both. And that gave me a little bit of experience, what is happening, etc., etc. And that gave me the confidence. So therefore, at least I knew that. And also, what happened was, in between, Unilever took on a project with McKinsey, and they said they wanted somebody to work with McKinsey, and I went. So I was part of the strategy team working on that export strategy. So it gave me a little bit of understanding of the business, the strategy, and it helped me in a way. But you're right. I think when you're completely switching jobs, when you're going to an area where you've not tested, you have lots of challenges. I mean, if something goes wrong, then I think you're always worried. Saying, hey, they'll say, yeah, here's the HR guy who's there, and that's why he screwed it up. That kind of a thing. So you're worried there. So you try extra thing, and therefore in the beginning, I had my own thing. I remember once there was a big shipment which we completely screwed up, and I got a lot of flack. But one learns from it and say, okay, okay, now we'll learn and let's see how we can do. So it is a challenge. You got to take it as a learning opportunity. You got to have people who work with. And thankfully, I think in levers, I think my leaders, I mean, my general manager, Viju Parmeshwar, the head of exports, Hari Mundra, those days, those times, they were like much more positive and saying, we want to give. So they were quite, they were very supportive. I think my bosses across the levels were pretty supportive, who kind of helped me. So I think it needs the right environment. It also needs you to take it, and learn carefully, and work on it, and work with people, and and talk to people as mentors and say, if they can give you some suggestions. If they see that you're keen to learn, then there are lots of people who are willing to help you, and they become much more supportive. And I must say I really enjoyed those 4 years, running the business there.
Wonderful. So, Krish, you have again taken another important leap in your career, which is starting out a new venture. So, can you talk about what is it that the venture is attempting to do? What problems you're trying to solve? And then I may have follow-up questions to just understand. I'm very curious to, hear about the venture and understand more about what you're trying to do.
Well, firstly, it's a very small one, yeah? And it's basically, I think when I retired from Infosys, which is now about exactly 5 months ago, I think one of the thing was I said, how do I spend my time? And in my own mind, I said, I want to do what they call as a plural career, yeah. And there were three things I wanted to work on. I said at least 50% of my time I want to work on the non-profit. And the balance 25-30%, maybe I'll do a bit of consulting, and another 10-20% will be some kind of teaching and mentoring. So I thought these are the three core areas I want to really work on. And when we're looking at this whole non-profit idea, a couple of friends and we got together, a couple of my batchmates also. And I think one of the things we found was, listen, the whole world is talking a lot of skilling, and the focus of skilling is lots more on the hard skills. But when the where the rubber meets the road is in soft skills. I think people fail, they don't get jobs because they lack those soft skills. So what we are trying to do is to create in a way, a kind of a university for soft skills for the underprivileged people in government schools, colleges, etc. So helping them think about what careers they can do, what kind of soft skills are there, and work on it. And in a way, our thinking is make it like a Khan Academy equivalent for soft skills. Yeah, so it's more digital primarily. Uh, Look at those soft skills in different languages, build the content. If you're either in Tamil, Bengali, you can see what is the content and learn. That's what we are thinking. But we are also looking at different ways of reaching out to people, partnering with other NGOs. The whole idea is that our strength is building good content where people can learn soft skills. But taking that and reaching out is something that we are working on. So very early
So, the
days. So
venture,
it's sorry.
sure, the venture will only look at soft skills upgradation, not any hard skills at this point in time, not any
At this
technical
point, the
skills.
focus on soft skills, yeah, and we'll see how it goes. But simple soft skills that are there, that basic behavioral social skills that people need to pick up. And one of the big things is also communication, especially English. But we're still thinking about how we can work on it. So that's the area. So really focused on that part.
Sounds like a very interesting thing. So, how are you finding the new, experience of being able to do so many different kind of things, at the same time?
Yeah, no, firstly, I'm learning. It's also hands-on work. So sometimes, I write, build set of things myself. So it's going back to the basics and doing stuff. So that's been there. I'm also trying to, as I said, I'm also trying to teach a course. So I'm building some cases for that. So talking to some people, and the world is also changing. And I'm talking to a couple of entrepreneurs and see how are they looking at HR and building a couple of case studies. So that's the other thing that I'm looking at. So yeah, so it's about putting on a new lens and seeing what it is and doing a lot of. So it's you got to do a bit of multitasking, but it helps, working on different things. Yeah, so it's keeping me busy.
Sure. And Chris, you talked about changes that are happening, right? So, post COVID, we are seeing a lot of changes in the entire way work is going to get delivered or performed, right? And as we go forward, we'll see a lot of impact of the new age interventions like the AI initiatives, which will have a significant impact in the way people are going to be working.
Yes.
So if we have to look at, some advice for people who are going to start their careers or are at an early stage of their career, what would you advise them to do to ensure that they are relevant in the coming few years when some of these things change the way things happen? So if
Yeah.
you can,
No,
talk about
I
some
think,
of those, it will be useful, especially targeting people who are new.
yeah. No, I think the point, Sanjay, is that the world is changing, and there are three things which are really accelerating the change. One is technology, yeah, and technology across every aspects. Now, AI is a very big part, and I think if you just look at most jobs, and I was just reading the latest McKinsey report, when it says that at least 30% of the jobs will change, or will kind of morph into something else. So that's a big change in the type of jobs, etc. And this rate of change is going to increase much more. So that's number one. Number two is companies are digitizing a lot more. Now the reach is there, the access is there. So they're saying, listen, every business wants to be a digital business. So therefore, there is, that's the other thing that's happening. I think the third, when I just look at it, is also our people's attitudes are changing, and when they're talking of various generations, I think that gap between generations is becoming shorter. And in India, those attitudes are changing much faster, and that's the third thing. People are not looking at jobs for life in a company. They're looking at how they can make an impact. So their attitudes are also changing. So with all these changes there, what I would say is, you will see that the kind of job. I mean, when we started off, I mean, for 5 years we were doing the job, nothing much would have changed. We do the same job, etc., etc. But now I think it's not going to be there. I think every 2 or 3 years something new will come. You'll have something new to do, new system, new this. The basics may be the same, the outcome of the job may be the same, but how you do it, the way you do it has to change. You've got to learn some new tricks there. So, and there are some industries where change is going to be much higher: media, entertainment, information technology, where if you're working in those areas, you're going to see a lot more change. Yeah? So I think you got to be ready for it. And what I would say is, I think all of us have to say, how do I kind of reset my career every 3 to 5 years? So do something, keep on and say, okay, 3 to 5 years, what are some of the changes that are coming? How can I really build on and build something in those changes? And keep, doing that. It's like, for example, if you were an entrepreneur and you say there's this nice language they all use called pivoting. So you go on, work, and say, okay, yeah, the product market fit is changing, so I'll pivot and do something else. So I think as individuals, we also have to do that. And it depends. Maybe in some industries, much faster, some industries may be longer. But 3 to 5 years, look at where you are and try and see what new skill you got to learn. So make yourself relevant there. Number two is, I think, as I said earlier before, while you do all of this, you're building your own brand. A leadership brand is very important. Yeah. And the core of it is build on your strengths, understand what they are, but then say, okay, what else do you want to be? So have that aspirational part and then work towards it. Yes. Therefore, you got to keep on that part also. And the third one, I think, is keep your mind open to a lot of new things. So people talk of this networking. I wouldn't call it networking, but I would say look at 3 or 4 sources where you can learn what's happening. Yeah. One is your own company. So meet different people in the organization, people who have taken up new challenges, people who are, in fast growing businesses, understand what they're doing. So learn from them, but also learn people in the profession, people who are outside in outside your company, but in your profession, who are doing new things. So you learn what is happening, and also learn in some areas of interest you, say technology, talk to some people. So have those, what I would call as 2 or 3 mentors or people who you talk to once a month, once a couple of months, just see what is happening, read that. I think that will keep you updated, and that'll also tell you what are the trends that are there, and you'll be ahead of those. So I'd say yes, keep this mind open to reset your career every 3, 4, 5 years. Keep learning, and also ensure that you kind of expand your learning through different sources, and whether it's networking or having lots more mentors, but that's very important also.
Sure, that's interesting. One of the other thing is that every organization faces a lot of early career attrition. So youngsters, when they join a company, they find the work not very interesting. They don't find a fit with the environment many a times. And there are a lot of people quitting at the early stage. Now, how can organizations work towards, doing something better at retaining some of these people? And how can people get the best out of some of these short stints that they have with some of these organizations?
See, I think what happens is the model generally in India is that we are a lot heavy on freshers. Every industry hires a lot more fresh people because there's not so much skilled talent in the industry. So you take on a lot more fresh people, and organizations have to train. That's how the model is, and that means that we take a lot more people, and there is a lot of attrition there. Now, what can organizations do? I think we've got to firstly kind of ensure that there's great onboarding, great mentoring in the early stages. Also, people are able to choose what they like to do in the first couple of years. Yeah, as I said, even in my own career, it was a bit tentative the first few years because we're all learning. We're not sure what is right. But I think those are things that organizations need to do a lot more about handholding them and telling them these are the different opportunities, choose what is best and do that. There'll be some who will not find the right fit and who will leave. But I think we've got to ensure that can they find the fit within the organization? Can they be mentored to be at their best? Can they be mentored to learn and do something? So those are some things that we've got to do. I think individuals are more important because I think now they have lots more choices. So they have to be clear what they want to do. Yeah. I mean, it's not like in the past that, listen, I need a job. Now there are choices. You can, if you're good, you can choose what you really want to do. So I think as individuals, we will have to give them enough information, enough thing to select the company they want. And that's where companies also have to be much more open, transparent in how they do this interview process. And individuals have to choose what does this career mean to me, and choose with lots more information. I think also spend the first 2 3 years really learning a lot more, taking all that is available within the organizations to learn. And then if there are growth opportunities within the organization, if they find a fit, they can grow. If they don't, then I think they can really kind of look around and go to other opportunities there. So I think the first 2 3 years is very critical. And when from my own experience, what really helps is I think you learn a lot more from some of the seniors that are there. So I think it's important to talk to a few people who are like, a couple of years of senior, not too senior, but find out what they're doing, learn from them. So I think that really accelerates your learning a lot more. So learn a lot from peers, especially a couple of seniors who are there. Try and take on lots of newer projects, experiment. I mean, if you take traditionally in every HR career, I've seen that people tend to really grow. I'm just giving an example, grow within a silo. I would say that at least in the first 5 years, at least try and do 2 or 3 different roles within that company, so you know what it is. That also builds your experience, but also kind of, ensures that you like what you want to do. Yeah. Tendency I've seen is people they go in one, they try to stay within the same thing, and they're reluctant to move because they're afraid they lose out or something. But I think in the long run, you don't lose out, you actually gain. So I think I would say first 5 years experiment, do different things so that you know what it is. So yeah, to your question, it's a kind of a issue in the industry, especially industries where we hire a lot of freshers. I think while companies can do, there are areas companies can work on. I think as individuals, we also have to look at how we can learn much faster, how we can have a few mentors or guides in the company to learn, do lots more different things and build our experiences and ensure that, there are right opportunities within the company you can grow. And if not, I think there will be opportunities elsewhere.
Sure. So, the newcomers into the careers are still very flexible, are very friendly with technology. A big challenge, many people who are in the mid management, they are going to face a lot of challenge with this changing work environment, right? Now, they also have reached a point where they've got very accustomed to a way of working. They've got some of their rigidity building in with age and with also working in certain environments and certain experiences. Now, what do they need to do now, given some of these changes that are happening at a rapid pace? What would be your advice for people? And some of the things that you've talked about for the younger population is also true for them. But what are the other things specifically people in the mid management career stage would need to do differently now to remain
Yeah.
relevant and to bring their personal best to work?
Okay. See, I think there are a couple of areas, let me try and start with a very offbeat one. I think the point is middle managers have some strengths that they've got to use. Yeah. And when you look at people with intelligence, I think the first, up to the age of 30 or 35, you have what you call as fluid intelligence. You're quick in connecting, you can make quick calculations, you're quick on the uptake. So that's the thing. But after you're 35, 40, that intelligence changes. I think then after that, it becomes like what kind of, condensed or experience or something, intelligence. What it happens is you got lots more within your learning, lots more wisdom. You've seen things. If you look at professors who are 70, 75, they're much more, they know a lot more. So that's what it is. So that's a different intelligence that comes in. So as mid managers, you got to build that, and that means you got to use that to kind of help others. You got to be great mentors. You got to bring your experience and wisdom, practical solutions in a more constructive way. Yeah, so use that intelligence because that's your strength. The second one is that also helps you develop a lot of people. So I think you got to also not worry but become a magnet for talent, developing talent, because that really is very important and organizations value that. Sometimes people don't see it, but I think the more you develop people, the more it gives you power to grow within the company. You don't have to be afraid of that. But I think that's another thing that I've seen are very important. The third one is really you got to say, okay, there are two things you got to do. You got to stay ahead of the curve within the industry or the company that you are in. So learn new things that the company is doing so that you are relevant. You're taken there. But yet at the same time, you got to say, listen, if this career is going to change, can I really do something else? Can I reorient my career? There you have to take some risk and pivot and do something else. Not everybody, but I'll say 10-20% of the people around that stage can pivot and say, I want to do something very different. And these are my strengths, but I want to do, get on and do something very different. So I would say these are three or four things that they can really build on. Bring to bear their wisdom, their intelligence built over years, and become a mentor. Use that in problem solving, constructive solutioning. Become a talent magnet, developing talent, and that really is a very powerful way of growing. Third, learn new areas, new skills that are there, and be ahead of the curve and be I think the key thing here is to be more like a thought leader, and that's what will keep you ahead. I mean, you can't be somebody who's just doing work, but you got to be a thought leader. So start building that. And the fourth one, when you looked at all of that, there are some strengths. See what else you can do. Move away and do pivot into something else. I've seen people who are pivoting and moving into academics. Some people are saying, I want to pivot and move into a very different role from working in a company to a consulting role. So there are people who make those changes. But I think you should also take that risk and do that. So yes, so I think this learning, taking a risk with your career is going to be very, very important. But stepping back, I think what we all have to do is, at the heart of all of this, Sanjay, is for us to discover what are we good at and build on it, and that is important. And if you look at the future at the higher levels, what do people value? People will value, most important, the different perspectives you bring. People will value problem solving abilities, ability to understand, solve problems. People will value your working in a team and building a team. I think that's going to be very, very important. That will become a very valuable thing. So these are things that you got to work on. Yeah. And technology is there. You got to be ahead of it, but you have to be seen more as a thought leader. So start thinking about how are you becoming a thought leader. So read, work on it. So I think within your own area, you got to be there. Otherwise, the world is so fast and changing so fast. If you're just managing things, then I think there'll be others who will overtake you. So you got to start becoming and building that edge, and building that edge is very important.
And Krish, any thoughts around mid-career going in to refresh your education, going back for a sabbatical, Would you recommend something like that, or in your career, have you had examples of people who went mid-career, went out of job, went in for a little bit of education, and came back and did really well?
I think there's lots of examples if you look at in across the world, in the US, in Europe. People, they work for a long time, and after 10 years, they go and do an MBA 1 year, and do that and then work. So I think in Europe, the MBA is done after much more experience rather than in India. So that's one thing. It depends on what is the course that you're doing, which really pivots and does something else. So if there are, I've also seen, I mean, again, a couple of people I know, and these are all, people who've done MBAs in India. They've worked for a few years and they said, no, I want to now go and do, after 5, 7 years, leave my job, do an MBA in the US in a bigger, in a reputed industry, and do a different role. Yeah. So they've tried to do that. But in India, that kind of a thing is very difficult to really, do that. The only thing that comes is for you to do an MBA if you've not done an MBA, and I think that's the only one which will help you do that. But there again, I think there is this 30 to 32. Beyond that, I think in India people are, it just doesn't really make a difference there. So I think you can do it till you're about 30 to 35. You can, do something, go ahead, do another kind of a course, wherever it is, overseas, do an MBA if you're not an MBA, do something else too, and kind of, ensure that leapfrogs you. But I would say more than that, in India, a large percentage of people have to continue to refresh. Do some other course while you're working. You don't have to take off and do it, but while you're working, do something that adds to your skill. I think more easily doable that you can. So these are two different choices. I think the first one uh, is not as prevalent in India, other than in the early career, but continuous learning really helps.
Sure. And again, people who are now at the late stage of their career, uh, many of the people are opting out of work and becoming advisors or consultants. Also, ageism is an issue. Everybody wants younger people in their organization. And that's been a significant challenge for people above, let's say, 50 years in finding the right kind of opportunities for a full time career. What would be your advice to some of these people who are opting to become freelancers or gig workers with platform like ours? How can they remain relevant and be able to pick up good quality work from the industry?
See, I think when you're opting out, you got to be known for certain things. You got to have a set of skills that you got, which is valued in the market. No, something that you've done that people will come to you for. And number two, you got to also build your own, what I would call as your brand. So you got to have these two together to really become successful as a kind of a, let's say, freelance entrepreneur, or a, I wouldn't call gig worker, but it's like, people who are doing plural careers or whatever it is. So I think these are important. You got to have a set of skills which are valued, where people will say, listen, here's somebody. So therefore, build those. And without those set of skills, it will be very tough for you to kind of, be in the market, because those skills have to be valued. Organization let us say, listen, I want to get this person this skill, and this is what it is. The second one is your brand. And this brand has to be about, here's a person who is an expert, who can come and solve problems, who's very good in working with teams, and who's committed, and who's credible. And that's very important. So you got to build that. And that brand, once you build, then I think it's not easy, but you got to start working and building that brand. And then I think you can get on to it. I've seen that if you look at a country like Netherlands, where I've been around and worked around, it's probably the one country which has a large number of people who are doing flexi work, part-time work, work sharing, job sharing, all kinds of things. So very, very open for that. UK is another one where lots of people are doing that. So I think these are countries which are leading the way. I think even in India, you will find a lot of opportunities for that. These kind of things help because you can balance your personal needs and work on certain things. But again, you got to ensure that you're known for your skills, you built your brand, and you have to work on a set of clients, a set of people with whom that's important. And maybe Sanjay, you and your team can help them build that client relationship, because that's critical. Because there are many things I've heard people who've been there saying, listen, sometimes I don't get paid on time, it's tough, companies treat people as vendors. So those are all hazards that we've got to get over with. But I think that's where we've got to see if there are opportunities to kind of remove those friction. I think that will really help people kind of take on these kind of opportunities.
No, very true. And the thing that you've talked about of building of your brand, we get a lot of people who worked in fairly generic managing the process kind of work. And that's something I keep telling everyone is not a skill that is in very big demand at this point in time. So what you talked about, problem solving being one of the things which is very, very important. And every organization, when they're looking for people to come in from outside, they're looking for people who can come in and solve a problem that they are facing, that the internal team is not equipped to handle. And that's a very good advice, I think. If you really want to become a gig worker, find a niche, especially if you're not looking at a content specific niche. That I'm very good at, let's say, sales training, but I can solve problems being a generic skill. And there, if you know how to do process audits, how to make sure you can design things, you can convert it into a technology solution. Those really work very well. And organizations are calling for people like those a lot on our platform as well. So that's great advice, I think. The other thing that you talked about brand is, again, in today's world, you need to do a lot more than what we are doing. Many of the people that I meet will say, oh, I don't have the time, I'm so busy with work, I can't engage with people, I don't go to events. And this networking and creating your brand is also very, very important, where you talk about what you're doing, you write maybe articles about it, or you contribute in groups when people are asking questions about problems their organization is facing, to
Correct.
create that brand image, right? So
Yeah.
lots of different ways one can do it, but
Yeah,
it
I
will
think
become very important.
Yeah, I think, see, the point is sometimes people think brand building means social media, that I got to keep posting in social media. And it could be one way, but that's not the only way. I think brand is, if you were to ask me what is a brand building, it's the core of what are you known for. And if suppose I say, okay, Sanjay, I mean, to a group of people, what do they say? That's his brand. That's the brand that is there. If what do people talk about me when I'm not there? And that's my brand. But once you know those are your strengths, this is what you're good at, you got to start saying, okay, how do I kind of, this is where I want to be a little more aspirational. I want to be seen as a thought leader. I want to be seen as a expert in these two areas. So you've got to work on it and let people know you're there. And I think, as Sanjay said, contribute, go and contribute to issues there, uh, write something about it, kind of teach somewhere. Those are kind of things where the more you go out and contribute and mentor people, then slowly you build your expertise. Yeah, it's not just about social media. I think people will have to
Correct.
see you as somebody who's willing to spend time to kind of learn, contribute, and deepen the expertise. And mentoring is one way, working with people is another way. And as I see you as somebody who's trying to help, I think that is a very, very powerful way of building your own brand. Yeah, so I think keep your eyes open and look out to help and mentor people. That helps. I've seen in my own experience, that's a great way to build a brand.
Great. So we'll take a few questions, Krish. Denzel is asking how to be stress free and calm while learning about a new job.
Well, a little bit of stress is important because that makes you learn. Have a little bit of stress that is there, so that you get into that flow. But you know what? I think this is Denzel. What I would say is there is this nice thing, that jargon that is going around called growth mindset. Yeah. So, and the growth mindset, all it says is that you got to look at everything as a learning opportunity. So if you have a problem and you fail, you say, "Ah, fine, I'm learning. Next time I'll do it better." So I think keep that in your mind, saying this is a learning thing. I may make some mistakes. I'm happy to make some mistakes, but I learn. That'll keep you stress free. That'll keep calm. But tell people around you also, because and so that they also know that, listen, you are making an effort, you are learning, and tell them, well, I'm happy for you to help me. So I think that also helps, because having one or two people who are there to support you, that'll also keep you calm. And find something that, in addition to the challenges in work, find something that really keeps you grounded, something, whether it's running or sports or whatever you want to do, that really helps you, because that can keep you grounded also when you're going through some challenges in whatever jobs you're doing. Yeah. So I think it's there's no one answer. Each one will find something which is right for them. But I think it starts with the mindset, and the mindset of saying, listen, I'm going to fail, I'm going to make some mistakes, but I learn from them and go ahead. I think that's important for you to really come.
Sure. So, others, if you want to ask any questions, you can ask on LinkedIn Live in the comments, and we'll be able to, take them up. So, Divesh has a question, which is also a question in many people's mind, I think, which is how do you strike a balance between pushing yourself to, do great amount of work and also avoiding burnout? So you're
Yeah.
pushing hard, you're really trying to contribute your best, you're trying to learn a lot of new things, and then there's the stress of failure. How do you ensure that you don't burn out under this condition?
Yeah. No, I think it's a very, very good question, and I think we've all been through it. Even I've been in my own experience. There have been times where I've had this burnout. Where you go ahead, and the early stage, early years, you work hard, you travel, and then you end up with, I've had problems, back pain, neck pain, all kinds of stuff, and had to take time off. So all that comes. So I think the wish my kind of learning in this is, I think what is the best for you. Yeah, I think firstly you have to do your best, and I think to do your best you got to have the right aspirations, and don't make aspirations in terms of growth or anything, but make aspirations in terms of impact that you will have. Yeah, that's more important. Don't worry about what comes out of it, but you say, this is what I will do, and this is the impact I want to make on this work. Yeah, I think that's the first step. So this whole the concept of Gita is very important here, that you put your efforts, see what impact you make. Don't worry about what's going to happen to me, my promotion, my this, they'll come. So the more we stress on that, then I think we put more pressure on ourselves. So that's the first one. And I think the second one is, you should enjoy what you're doing, and I think you can push yourself more when you're enjoying it. And this is what Mihail, whatever it is, Csikszentmihalyi talks about, being in flow, where there is enough stress and enough learning, which helps you be in that flow. Yeah, you've got to learn, you've got to enjoy what you're doing. The minute you find you're not enjoying, it's getting repetitive, then you know that you may reach burnout. So then you slow down. Yeah, so I think you've got to, that's something you got to feel for yourself, and that may be different for each one, that you got to feel for yourself and do, and then try and calm down, slow down, and do something else, and or find something new in it. I think, in those days in levers, I think we had a very good thing. We had called objectives, and we said, listen, let's take one or two that will make a difference in this year. You can't do many, but in a job you can say, listen, while operationally things are going on, I'm going to make one or two transformational difference. Just take those, and once you do that with that focus, you'll be able to really ensure that you're achieving something and not getting burnout. So I think, again, focus is important. So to summarize, focus, don't just go all over the place. Take one or two things where you can make an impact. Be in that flow, have enough stress, but enjoy what you're doing. The minute you feel that you're not liking it, then you slow down and find something else. Yeah. And the third one is, I think you have to really pace what you want. Yeah. And you can decide what really what is the max that you can go to. Don't put too much pressure on it, and focus on the impact that you're making, and not what is it, what will eventually happen to your career. So that result always comes. Don't worry about it.
So true. So Bijoy has a question, which actually is to support the thing that you talked about a supporting environment, but the need for also proactively as an individual taking effort. So we will not all get, great environments all the time. Sometimes you may get a bad manager or a bad culture that you will end up with, but you can still make the best of that situation. So what's your take on how do you work in an environment which is not the most appropriate or friendly for you?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. We all go through that. But listen, in the end, it's all a question of people, right? I mean, there may be one person there who's not very friendly, but there are others also. So I think the minute you talk about it and you say and you talk about your own challenges and your own vulnerabilities, I always found that there are people to help. Yeah. So therefore, uh, generally, I've found that 95% people are positive, they're willing to help. There may be a few here and there, but you know I've, I've seen very little of them. But I would say, but I think it starts with your own intent. You got to say, listen, I'm going to make the best out of it, but these are the challenges I'm getting. And suppose I'm giving you an example. Suppose you're in a team, the manager is not very supportive, but you talk to your friends saying, listen, that other members of the team, this is what I'm trying to do, but I'm not. You'll find one or two others who are supportive. There'll be others who will come out, and I think once you have that supportive thing, you can start making. So start with the positive intent, build a coalition of people, and that will start by you being open about your own challenges, and enlisting their support. So build a coalition of people who will help support you, and then do your best. But still, with all of this, still if you're not getting, then I think you got to reach out to others, maybe go to the HR department or somebody else and see what else they can do to kind of help you with that. So I think we are all individuals. I think everyone goes through their own challenges. And I think the other thing, and this is a great advice, Mr. R. Gopal Krishnan gave me once. He said that look at your boss as a customer, because he's a customer. When a customer says something, you always listen. Your boss is also a customer. I mean, so therefore think about it that way, so that you understand. Therefore, you have to see what is it and how you want to respond to it. But yes, there are limits. I mean, you can't just go beyond. I mean, you can't be disrespectful. Those things you should not stand for. But if there are areas that the customer wants, you will try and satisfy them within that thing. So think of it that way. So I think that's another mindset that I found always quite helpful.
One of the things that I've talked about a lot is that the best way to make a good career for yourself is by pushing your boss up or making them look good. So if you can make them look good and they move up in their career, you have an opportunity to move up as well. So yeah.
So true. Yeah.
So Ravikant has a question where he's asking for some practical strategies for employees to become more self-reliant and agile, where they can work more on their own rather than with constant guidance from supervisors.
Well, I think this is something we got to build. I think what has happened sometimes is, wherever I was speaking to somebody yesterday, an entrepreneur, and he was saying, listen, whenever I hire somebody, they'll say, what do I do? You tell them again, they'll come up. So I think we're used to a little bit of, being told what to do. We're also used to being a little bit afraid of not making a mistake. Those are the two areas that are there. So, and that's why we kind of, not people don't take full accountability. And that's also, those are some of these challenges. So to your think about what could be a practical advice one can give people is, I think number one, you got to tell them, you are accountable for this, and that thing is, at the end of it, I'm not going to see, but I'm going to see what is the end result. So I want you to look at the focus on the end result. So that's number one. So they start thinking. Number two, what I've always found is, give them an objective which is a little bit higher than what they're supposed to do. For example, I'm just taking a simple example. For example, somebody is running a process. While there are all these SLAs, you got to say, okay, in addition to this, can you come up with a better way of doing this? Can you come up with saying, okay, how can you reduce this by 20%? Give them this so that they start thinking, and that makes them not only just doing the thing, but they also come up with something on their own. Yeah. So, and I think sometimes giving them that empowerment, telling them to do also helps. So that's the second thing that I do. Give them an objective which is a little higher, something which will make them think differently and go up and do that. Once I think, and the third one is tell them that listen, when you fail, you learn from it, so therefore learn from others. You don't have to keep on, so look around, learn from others and teach others. So create that environment where there is a lot of peer learning from others and telling others what they're doing. I think these three will really help create people take much more accountability for what they're doing.
And as an employee, also, I think every time that we are facing a challenge, rather than go and seek guidance, many a times, many people would do this as upward delegation because you don't need to take blame for it then,
They're
because
afraid.
I did
That's very
exactly what, yeah, you asked me to do. And that creates a constant, spiral kind of a thing where you're never learning anything because you're not taking your chances, you're not taking your risks, you're not learning new things as well.
Hmm.
So those are important things I think that you should look at, where you look at the options. If you're not sure of the options, go and get it validated, rather than asking questions directly, every time that you face a challenge. So one of the names is very familiar. You also know the great guy Alok
Nigam,
Nigam.
the
He
great
is
man.
saying brand building, and without personal credibility, you will not be able to do much, right? What do we need to do to create that personal credibility?
I think Alok is somebody who's probably one of those with very high credibility. I think what is it? Firstly, I think where does credibility come from? Credibility comes from expertise. So you got to build some expertise that you've done. Yeah. So therefore, people know that if there is something on compensation, I can ask this person. If there is something on tax, I can ask this. So the credibility comes from your expertise. That's number one. Number two, credibility comes from your commitment or sticking to commitment. So therefore, you say, here it is, what it is, Therefore, I had a boss who used to tell me he measures people by a say-do ratio, how much they say versus how much they do. And he says that majority of people say a lot more and do very little, and there that's like clearly credibility goes down. So you got to find somebody who's like does what he says. That's very important. So I think as for us to build credibility, I think that's very important. Keep your say-do ratio to one. Say, but do whatever you say. I think the third one, which is your values. Yeah, your what is it that it is, and I think people, you can build your credibility by kind of being upfront, saying this is something, and where people say, listen, here's a person who, at the risk of losing a business, is making a statement. Yeah. And there was this great example. I mean, I'm giving you a old story. Mr. Narayanamurthy once said he had a big business with GE, and because of certain things, he said, "I'm not going to do it." And it was a tough decision, but he said, "I'm going to take it." That helps build credibility all across because you're going and living by values. Yeah. So that's the third way to build your credibility. So I think I would stick to these three. You should have some expertise, you should stick to your commitment. I mean, people should trust you, because number three, here's a person who lives by values. He or she is somebody, and there are certain values that you're living with. I think that's important. Whatever it is, I think people don't mind somebody. I've seen people, somebody who's maybe quite rough in the way they speak, but the credibility is high because that person will say as it is, calling a spade, and they build that credibility. Yeah. So I think you got to live by your values. And if you're consistent by your values, then you build your credibility. So I would say these are the three ways. But Alok, of course, will have lots more kind of advice and experience also, and maybe he can also share a lot more.
True. And one of the things which is also important to understand is that you mentioned about social media being given more importance than what it truly deserves. And that's where many people who may come out to be very, very knowledgeable, uh, when given a live situation to work on a problem, may not be able to deliver. And that's where it's important that you also know how to deliver. The thing that you said about, what you say vis-a-vis what you do, that becomes important and is very, very critical in building credibility. So Debanjani has a question. What are the best resources for learning or building or upskilling yourself, something apart from normal courses on internet today?
I think the best way to learn is to take on and do some projects yourself. Do something different, take on some projects. Volunteering is a good way. There are areas where you can volunteer in different things, so you can learn a lot more there. Yeah, so that is there. Number two is I think I wouldn't call it networking, but meet people who are doing lots of different things in the areas that are of interest to you. For example, talk to people in the area of technology if that's of interest. Talk to people in different industries like media. So I think you got to identify maybe through professional sources, through professional organizations. There are many like those. I think CII, all of those are there. So find out where you can really participate, see what is happening, and identify people whom you can talk to. Yeah, take them as some sort of mentors. So find out what is there. The third way to quickly learn is I always found in a way the social media is a good way to learn. It's not a great way to broadcast yourself. I don't think so. I wouldn't recommend that so much. But as a learning tool, it's a great way because if you can follow key people, key kind of handles, like, and I'm just talking like Harvard Business Review, or if there are of interest, you'll find lots of new things that are happening. Like for example, there are lots of people who are talking about what's happening in technology, in AI, and chat GPT, and social media. You'll have some people who are sharing a lot, then you'll know what it is. I found, like, for example, there's a professor called Ethan Mollick from Wharton. Following him on Twitter, I learned a lot about AI and what's happening. So there are, but go for credible sources. Don't go for sources who are marketing themselves. But there are credible sources where you can learn from. Yeah, these are not courses, but you can learn and you can pick up things. So YouTube is another great way. I think so. I think there are these non-conventional ways rather than going to a course. But the biggest thing is for you to work on a project yourself. Do something which is different. Work on it. You'll probably learn a lot more there.
Sure, we can take one quick last question where Shripati is asking, what's the best time to change the career? If I'm in a safe zone and strong with current work, what is the best approach to change my area and change my career?
I don't have an answer to this because this is like there's no one answer. I think the point here is you got to see what is the motivation for you. Yeah, if you're doing well and you're in an area where you think there's good growth potential, then I think you should continue. Yeah, you got to say, okay, what should I learn more? What new skills should I learn more to grow up and work on it? Yeah, for example, if you're in sales, if you're doing something very well, you say, okay, I want to be a business head. Maybe I have to learn a little bit about business, marketing, etc. Work on it. Maybe I've got to learn a little bit about understanding strategy, perspective, vision, connecting the dots. Build those. Yeah, that's how you grow. But if you find that, listen, I'm stalling, I'm not growing, I'm stuck, then you got to find out why is it so. Yeah. Is it because the industry is not there? Is it because you're not liking the job? Then I think you find what else to do. Yeah. So look for the reasons there and see, yes. And then find out what is interesting to you. You find something very interesting, very appealing, then I think you got to kind of make a switch there. So again, no one answer. You got to think of what are your own motivations, what are your own interests, what are your own aspirations. Yeah, I think about all of those, and then I think you can find the thing. There is no, I wouldn't say there is any right time to change or any wrong time to change. Yeah, I think depending on the situation, you can do anything. There are people who've changed careers in their 50s. There are people who've changed when they're 30s. Yeah, so that's possible. But I think you got to have the right mix of the right reasons for it, the right motivation, the right kind of interests, and based on that, you can do that.
And the thing that you talked about pivoting, I think with the changes that are happening in the way work is going to get delivered in the future, the reasons for change will come much faster and without, you know, we will not be in a comfort zone for long, according to me, going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
with disruptions happening in the work we are doing, new technologies coming in, new ways of doing the same thing. One will have to look at very quick movement from what you were doing to the new way of working. Otherwise, you'll not remain relevant in the career. So that's all we have time for. So thank you, Krish. It was a great opportunity. Some of the key takeaways from me from the conversation are to keep learning skills which are of value to the organization and also to others, and be able to then create a brand where you're known for some of these, where people talk about what you can do. That's very important. The second thing that you talked about, which really strikes a chord with me, is that learn by doing something rather than just reading stuff. But the more you work on certain things, the more you'll be able to pick up things, right? And the other thing that I found very interesting was the fact that as we are working in our careers, our ability to be able to understand how we can add value to the organization, to understand what the organization is trying to do, and be able to then contribute to it, that becomes significantly important. So thanks, Krish. Great to have you with me on this inaugural event, and hopefully we'll be able to talk to you about other things in future as well.